here we are. What up, peeps? Here we are back with another feedback video. This time it is the analysis essay feedback. Here we go. Another edition. Well, I am recording this from my basement. It is, Sunday, February 23rd, 2022. But you know what? You might be watching this video far in the future. If anybody remembers this day, it's only 1:53 in the afternoon, but though I'm not a fan, the Buffalo Bills are getting ready to take on the Kansas City Chiefs in the divisional round to try to get to the AFC Championship game. Are we going to look back on this day favorably? We don't know. We're going to find out. Anyway, good to see everybody. Thanks so much for checking in to this video. This is, I am actually going to make this much quicker than the argument essay video, believe it or not. Promise. It's not going to be 50 whatever minutes that other one is. Alright, so let's hop right into it. Shrink myself so you guys can see, here. I'm going to move myself up to the top corner. Yes, there we go. Alright, everybody. So, first of all, just to kind of align yourselves, get yourselves thinking about this. The whole idea with this video, just like with the argument essay video, is that you are going to take a look at your rubric, look at the feedback that I gave you, look at the different sections on the rubric, the different criteria, and you're going to use that to kind of direct you to the sections of this video that will help you with your revisions. Now, I am going to allow anyone to do revisions, whether, no matter what grade you got. If you really want to perfect this task in this essay, this is your opportunity to do so, and this is your resource in order to do that, okay? Now, first of all, I want to just orient you with this document. As I mentioned, I break it down by the different criteria. So we got the introduction, thesis statement, evidence, and then we go down to our development of appeal strategies and tone, and then we go down to coherence, organization, precision, and sophistication of language, grammar, and conventions. All right, now there are two other things that I added in here, and in fact, I will talk about these first because I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to look at these. This is going to be part of my introduction bit, so don't go anywhere just yet. So, the time challenges. If this is our first essay and you had, multiple days to work on this and you had the opportunity to type it, then the time challenge isn't necessarily a challenge for you yet. But we will do one in class, and maybe this is the time you're looking at the video after we've done one in class over 40 minutes, and you're realizing, you know what, you're running just a little bit tight on time. If that's the case, here are some recommendations, all right, having difficulty with time constraints. Do another analysis response and time yourself. If you're interested in doing another one, let me know, and I'd be happy to give you as many as you want to do. Don't overanalyze, all right? And this is good for people even if you've just done your first one and you are, you had the opportunity to type it and really take your time to work through it. Don't overanalyze. 1 to 2 strategies is enough, all right? If in your first body paragraph you want to talk about just logos, all right, and you have many examples of that, that's enough, all right? You don't have to talk about ethos, logos, and pathos. You don't have to talk about, anaphora, rhetorical questioning, historical allusion, and go on and on and on in your second body paragraph. Just pick 1 to 2. All right. The other thing too is you may not have to read the entire passage. Now I hesitate to say this because I think it's very important that you do. All right. But if you're someone who's really short on time, all right, what I would suggest is maybe skim to get the gist of the passage and see what appeals, strategies, and tones stand out to you right away. Okay? Because there may be a bunch that stand out to you. You may be able to identify the author's precise argument without really diving deep into the passage. Because if you wanted to, you could spend a good 15 to 20 minutes on any of the given passages, reading through it, really breaking it down, picking out every appeal and every strategy and every example of tone. All right, you don't need to do that. The other thing too is, some analysis-specific notes. And it depends on what the first prompt that we did is, but just be aware that religious allusion, just because, a religion is mentioned, that is not, sufficient enough to point out religious allusion. All right, there's got to be more. It's when really the speaker is brings up a passage from a religious text, or mentions a religious figure, or presents an idea that's found in a religious practice, and the speaker is is expecting the argument to know that. All right, I have an example here that I'm not going to get into, but take a look at it for yourself. And then the last thing, with pathos, what I want to remind everyone is that pathos is an appeal to the audience's emotions. All right, now you may identify, in your tone paragraph that the speaker is speaking passionately, and that's awesome. You always have to make sure, though, that you bring it back to how does that emotional language, how does that emotionally charged language, how does that emotional tone, how would that impact the audience's emotions, given what we know about the audience. All right, well, let's actually get into it. Oh, last thing I want to show you is that I have 3 model essays in this document. All right, and you can go through, and for many of you, I left feedback saying check out these model essays. These model essays are absolutely fantastic, and go along with the 2015 prompt, the Madeleine Albright prompt. All right, so they're perfect. All right, criteria number 1, introduction. So here's the big thing with the introduction is that most people got really close to getting right up to really establishing the rhetorical situation. But if you did not, if you lost some points on the introduction section, take a look at this right here. What I'm asking you to do is attempt to explain how the speaker, audience, and occasion at the least, right? Because we also talk about exigence, which is like what prompted the speech to happen. We talk about the purpose, we talk about the subject of the speech, but really the speaker, the audience, and the occasion, how do those all come together to create synergy, to create a special moment? All right, you got to understand who the speaker is to some degree and who makes up the audience. All right, making a connection between those two and understanding how it is that speaker has credibility to speak to the audience is really important. So here's an example that I wrote, all right, for the Madeleine Albright piece. The rhetorical situation is significant because Madeleine Albright is the Secretary of State and therefore an extremely successful woman. Furthermore, she is speaking to an audience of recent female graduates from Mount Holyoke College. Albright possesses automatic ethos due to her position in government and her tremendous success on the world stage. She possesses the power to speak words of genuine wisdom to young women who are primed to enter the workforce and ultimately empower her audience to embrace the inner strength they possess as educated women. The key is making an explicit connection, all right, between the speaker and the audience. And at one point, here towards the end, getting the audience to embrace the inner strength and they possess as educated women. All right, I'm also starting to touch on what is her purpose. All right, and her purpose is to empower these women. All right, the fact that she's a female and the fact that her audience consists of females is extremely important, and that should be included in your introduction in establishing your rhetorical situation. All right, next criteria. Thesis statement. For the most part, people did a great job with thesis statement. If you lost some points here, please take a quick look at the thesis formula. All right, make sure that in your thesis you identify rhetorical appeals. Now, reminder, guys, rhetorical appeals are ethos, logos, pathos. All right, those are the 3 appeals, as opposed to rhetorical strategies. All right, strategies are where we have things like anaphora, metaphor, historical allusion, religious allusion, all of those things, hypophora, okay? And then have a tone descriptor, clearly identify the tone, and then please, you've got to identify the speaker's precise argument. In your thesis statement, organize your essay according to those. Now, if you want to start off with strategies and then talk about appeals and then talk about tone, I'm totally fine with that. I honestly, the order in which you present these things is not as important as the fact that you do hit on all 3 of them somewhere in your essay. However you organize them in your thesis statement, make sure that that's how you organize your essay. So, for example, right, if I'm talking about my rhetorical appeals as the first thing in my thesis statement, that should be how I plan out my essay. That should be my body paragraph number 1, rhetorical appeals. If the second thing is rhetorical strategies, body paragraph 2, rhetorical strategies, so on and so forth. All right, told you we're going to move quickly. Evidence, the next criteria. This one is maybe some new things for many of you, because this is really the first piece we've written where you're actually pulling evidence from a text. You know, as opposed to the argument essay where you're just pulling it from your own experiences and observations and things that you've read but that you don't have in front of you. So here are a few pointers. All right, first of all, cite line numbers either within your narrative or parenthetically. All right, make sure that you're always citing your line numbers. If you did not, here's a couple ways that you can do it. Example one is you could say, in lines 9 through 10, Kennedy argues, all right, and I'm pulling an example from another piece where John F. Kennedy is the speaker. All right, so in lines 9 through 10, Kennedy argues, all right, so I identify the line numbers before the quote, so I don't have to cite them again at the end. All right, or another option is I could say Kennedy declares, comma, go into my quote, and at the end you'll notice I do not have a period inside of the quotation marks. Instead, I save my period for after the citation. There is a time where this is a little bit different, and I'll mention this again later. If this quote were to end in an exclamation point or a question mark, I would actually, in that case, include the exclamation point in there and still include the period at the end. All right, but if there's a period, if the sentence ends with a period, then I just include the period after the citation. Also, you do not need to cite line numbers if you're speaking about a repeated line. All right, and here's a great example of someone who did this in their essay. All right, one of the main strategies she uses is repetition. She starts multiple paragraphs with "if you aim high enough" to place emphasis on how she wants all of these graduating women to aim to be the most successful they can be. Repeating this phrase draws attention and importance to the hardships that you will face if you want to succeed. Albright also says, have courage still and persevere in the concluding sentence of multiple paragraphs. All right, so you'll notice this person does not cite every time that those things are repeated, those phrases are repeated, but the person who wrote this essay does do a really good job of identifying the fact that it is mentioned in multiple places. All right, just one side note, one of the things that I am going to ask you to avoid, all right, in case you see this and you're saying, wait, but this person used you. Yeah, avoid you in your analysis. Okay, but this is a great example of not having to cite line numbers if you're talking about a repeated phrase or word. All right, the other thing too is make sure that you are leading into quotes. All right, and there are a couple ways you can do that. One example that I have here is Albright states, claims, argues, says. All right, a lot of you did a good job at this, but if you got some points off for not leading into quotes, this is what I'm talking about. Please don't have a quote standing alone by itself. All right, that is, even though we are talking about a singular text here, you always want to make sure that you're being very clear about who you're quoting and who's saying the quote, okay? You'll also notice that I have a comma, right? If I have Albright states, claims, argues, says, comma, space, quotation. All right. Now, here's a little bit different way to lead into a quote. You can use a colon to lead into a quote when you have a complete sentence before the quote. So if you don't want to say something like Albright claims, instead what you can do is you can say call to action is used in the last paragraph of lines 98 to 107. Now you'll notice this is a complete sentence, right? Call to action is used. So a call to action is my subject in the sentence. Used is my verb. Okay, and then I have, because I have a complete sentence, I could put a period here and say, Albright says. Instead of doing that, I can just put a colon at the end, and now it's clear that Albright is the one who's saying this. All right, and now you go into the quote, okay? And notice, because the page numbers are already mentioned here, you don't need them at the end. All right? Now, you just because you have them here, if you were to parenthetically cite at the end, you're not going to lose points for that. In fact, if you're ever worried about it, it's better to over parenthetically cite than under. Next bullet, cut down quotes to capture only the necessary content for the sake of time, efficiency, and concision. All right, this is going back to that time idea that eventually when you guys have to handwrite these and you only have about 40 minutes to complete this task, really try to cut down the quotes to capture only the part that you really need. Okay, that is going to be very helpful in terms of concision and time and efficiency. Punctuation and citations. All right, these are some important notes. If a period ends the quoted sentence, place the period after the citation only. All right, and I just talked about this above, right? So for instance, she tells, we could be satisfied with that. All right, because this sentence, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but because the sentence ends in a period, I don't need the period there. All right, instead I put the period after the citation. As I said, if an exclamation or question mark ends the quoted sentence, include the exclamation or question mark and then include a period after the citation. All right, so I just kind of like reworded the sentence just a little bit to make sense for this example. But for instance, she asks, we could be satisfied with that. Instead, are we enlarging and adapting NATO and striving to create a future for Europe? All right, here's where you'd see, right, if you had that question mark, you would have it in there and then you'd still include the period at the end. If you are citing something where you have quotation marks, or I'm sorry, if you are including something that has quotation marks, but you're not parenthetically citing it, your punctuation is always going to go inside the quotation marks. All right, so this is a little bit different than if you're citing. So for example, one of the ways in which Albright establishes pathos is with the use of the pronouns we and our. All right, and honestly, this could be pathos, or I'm going to change this to ethos because that's a little bit more accurate when we're talking about use of we and our. But anyway, if you see here the use of our, right, I have my quotation marks. I'm not citing anything in particular. I'm going to include my period within those quotation marks. Here's also another just pointer. When analyzing repetition or anaphora, no need to cite every line number or word or phrase is used in. I mentioned that above, but I want to just give you another way that you can do this. It says a major one is anaphora. Albright repeatedly uses the phrase, if you aim high enough, first introduced in line 70 and later followed by have courage still and persevere, which is first used in line 75. All right, so that's another way that you could, make sure that you're not oversighting something when you're talking about repetition. I know ellipses, because people are trying to be very efficient and concise with their evidence, they're using ellipses, right? The ... okay? Which we see used right here. You do not need to use that at the beginning of a quote. So, for example, you'll see an incorrect example here. But then she further specifies by telling how women have endured to find justice by stating, comma, quote, ... Aung San Suu Kyi, who risks her life every day to keep alive the hope for democracy in her country, at line 61, period. Everything about this analysis, by the way, because this is from one of the models, is fantastic. Just a small little detail. You don't need that ellipses at the beginning, okay? Instead, you would just start it as if it's the beginning of the sentence, okay? With no ellipses at all. Now, here's the thing. If you are trying to include, evidence from one section and you don't want a bunch of the stuff in between and you want evidence from a later part in the passage because you want them close together but you don't want the content in between, here's what you can do. Place the ellipses within brackets if citing text that is not continuous within a piece. For example, all right, she said, as you go along your own road in life, you will, if you aim high enough, also meet resistance. Now, this person, obviously there's some content in between here that this person doesn't want. It's not relevant to the analysis. In order to demonstrate that those ellipses are not actually in the text, you have to put them in brackets, just like I did here, and I highlighted it, okay? So when you put something in brackets, it shows that it's not actually in the original text. It's something that you've altered or that you have added. Awesome. Let's move to the next criteria: development of appeals, strategies, and tone. In your explanations, always seek to tie back to the rhetorical situation. All right, tying back to the rhetorical situation will ensure strong analysis. A few people got points off for this because the key is anytime that you're looking at, an appeal, anytime that you're looking at a strategy, anytime that you're looking at tone, you've got to explain how is that an effective appeal strategy or use of tone to appeal to the audience. All right, so that's why you're going to go back to that rhetorical situation. In Albright's case, right, she is trying to empower young women. She a woman herself, and a powerful woman in a position of power, Secretary of State of the United States. She is trying to, you have to go back and mention that when you're explaining how, for example, her repetition of a certain word or phrase is going to appeal, is going to, impact her audience members. All right, so make sure you're always going back to that. And if you got some points off for development, look at the model essays because they did a fantastic job with this. Provide explicit development of how an example is a rhetorical strategy. All right, so I give an example here. And when I say explicit, right, sometimes guys, saying something as simple as like, this is an example of hypophora because, or this is an example of repetition because. All right, sometimes you have to be that explicit. When Albright provides various examples of strong women from all over the world, including women in Burundi who have risked their lives helping those in Rwanda escape the violence, she is appealing to the audience's emotions because the women in the audience see themselves represented in the powerful women Albright mentions. Such an emotional appeal will empower these women to follow suit. All right, so I'm really going back and explaining exactly how is it that these examples are going to emotionally impact the audience members, okay? In your analysis, stick to what the speaker is saying will resonate with the audience and not with you as the reader, all right? Some people get caught up in trying to think about, you guys as being the audience. You're not the audience, all right? And it's particularly not in this case. So make sure that you're always going back to how is what the speaker is saying impacting the audience, based on what we know about the audience. Then the last bullet here, as a reminder, don't forget automatic ethos. All right, automatic ethos is present when a speaker holds a position or has experienced something that gives him, her, or them credibility to speak on an issue. The audience is typically aware of that position or experience before listening to the speaker. All right, in this case, we have Madeleine Albright as the Secretary of State. She has automatic ethos. She has automatic ethos with, especially considering her audience of female college graduates. All right, she is a woman who has found great success, and because of that, when she uses words like we and us and our, and she talks to this audience, she not only makes herself, puts herself in the same level as them, as these people, but she also holds a position of power and is a symbol or a representation of what these women can be. Okay, so she has automatic ethos, she has automatic credibility coming into the conversation. I have an example of really strong development here. This is from one of the model essays, but I pulled it out so that you guys can see a great example of really strong development. So if you are someone who, got some feedback on your rubric saying, that you're missing strong development, take a look at this one because it's extremely, extremely well done. All right. Next criteria, coherence and organization. This one is going to be pretty brief, and I've already kind of mentioned this in a different section, but, going along with the thesis statement, organize your appeals, strategies, and tone body paragraphs in the order that you outline them in your thesis statement. All right. Sometimes I have people who outline something in their thesis statement and then never talk about it. Make sure you talk about it somewhere in your essay. And sometimes I have people outline, they do their appeal and then they say their strategy and then they talk about tone in their thesis and then they completely change up the order in the essay. Don't do that. All right. Make sure that you're establishing your organization in your thesis and that you then follow it. And I kind of just hit on this, but if you claim you will analyze an appeal strategy or tone descriptor in your thesis, ensure that you do so in your body paragraphs. That's the big thing for coherence and organization. All right. Next criteria, precision and sophistication of language. Everybody's favorite. This is one that is very hard to teach. I think the best way for you to really get a good sense of sophisticated language is, again, to look at the model essays at the end of this document. But some really simple things that you can do is avoid you. I know for a lot of people it's kind of just a natural thing. Focus on the audience for analysis, right? So here's an example. By providing this inspirational line as well as many others, she helps the graduates, not she helps you, she helps the graduates to understand their purpose. The change starts with them, so they must step up to the challenge. All right, and I say that right here. Rather than saying she helps you understand your purpose, the analysis remains on the audience. Next bullet, always use the speaker's last name when referring to him, her, or them throughout your essay. Only use first name when it's paired with the last name. All right, the purpose of this is to maintain respect for the speaker and a formal voice in your essay. I had a lot of people using Madeleine by itself. In the end, we can't be, saying like my girl Maddie. All right, we gotta stick to and make sure that it's formal. You know, especially that's what the scorers for the exam are going to be looking for. So no matter who the speaker is, always, if you're not referring to first and last name together, all right, just use the last name. And it would be acceptable to also say Ms. Albright. All right, in this case, that is totally acceptable as well. And then the last one, you know, did you use higher level vocabulary? Did you vary your sentence structure throughout? All right, varying sentence structure is challenging. All right, but do you use a variety of sentence structure? And again, the model essays do a really good job of that. It doesn't feel like, you know, they're using the same, you know, just like subject, verb, predicate over and over and over. They're changing up the syntax, the order of ideas within their sentence, okay, and the structure of their sentences. So take a look at that. All right. All right, last criteria, grammar and conventions. All right, this is comma splice is a review from the argument essay. All right, so if you found that you also got points off on comma splice for the argument essay, that's because you didn't look closely at this, or you might have, and maybe it slipped your mind, okay? But comma splices, these are one of the biggest things that I see students, in terms of grammar and conventions, I see students do. This is one of the things that shows up on the SAT exam. A comma splice is the incorrect use of a comma between two independent clauses or two complete sentences. All right, and I'm using the example, I took it right from our first argument essay. McCarthy is also using fear to say that if Americans do nothing about it, communism will ruin democracy. This appeals to the fear of losing democracy. All right, so here are two possible ways you can fix that. This is where we have our comma splice. All right, because right here, McCarthy is also using fear to say that if Americans do nothing about it, communism will ruin democracy. Because we have if in this first part of the sentence, it makes it a dependent clause, so you've got to have something else, which is this, comes after the comma. That's okay. But here we have our comma that's between two complete sentences. All right, so two options. One, throw a semicolon in there. That separates two sentences, two complete sentences that are close together in idea, all right, that are related in idea. All right, the other thing is use a period. All right, that's really simple. If you are someone who struggles with commas a lot, try to think about, you know, as you're reading your piece, rereading it, hopefully you're taking the time to do that, to proofread. When you go through and proofread, you know, I would suggest that you try to include more periods rather than commas. And at that point, you might start to be able to figure out where it is that you're seeing these comma splices. Okay. Example 2, right? Take speeding on a road or highway, comma, you get a ticket for speeding, and if you get too many tickets in a year, you may have your license revoked. This is the government using fear to control its people, comma. So these red sections are where we have comma splices, and you'll see I use both fixes down here, either a semicolon or over here I have a period. Now the other thing you can do, and I didn't include it in here, is that if you have you know, McCarthy is also using fear to say that if Americans do nothing about it, communism will ruin democracy. You could have, comma, a conjunction in here, and this appeals to the fear of losing democracy. You could use and, right, or conjunctions, fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. We could include that in here, but that would make this sentence a bit bulky and a bit of a, give it the feel of a run-on, so I wouldn't suggest that, okay? I also had, however, therefore, moreover in the feedback for the argument essay. There are two options for punctuation, for punctuating, however, when it is used as a transition. All right, so if I have it within a sentence and I'm saying women, however, have come a long way, all right, I would say women, comma, however, comma, have come a long way. But that's not how this is being used. We have an example here, women have come a long way before they gained their voting rights, comma, however, the issue between gender inequality remains unresolved to this day. In this case, we have two options, all right? We either can use the semicolon, however, comma, all right, because we have two closely related sentences, because we have however, we have a transition, or we can use the period, capital, however, comma, the issue between, all right, and continue going on that way. Last thing, possessives. For some reason, I saw a bunch of people didn't pay close attention to their possessives throughout the essays, don't forget, right, the singular possessive nouns, right? In this case, Albrights. I had a lot of people, you know, giving possession to Albright, but forgot to, you know, throw that apostrophe in there. Just as a little side note, plural possessives, right? If we were saying like the Albrights' house, right, where we have many people from the family living in that house, we would have S to show that it's plural, right? That it's many people by that name, and then we have the apostrophe after showing that it's possessive, that it belongs to all of them. All right, and just as a reminder, do not use an apostrophe to denote possessive pronouns like its or theirs. All right, no one did this, but it's just a quick reminder. All right, my friends. Well, hey, that is the video. Like I said, it was going to be a lot quicker this time than it was last time. Thank you so much for checking it out. Of course, if you guys have questions, I am always willing to meet, so please let me know. You know, send me an email or come see me in class and let me know that you would like to have the opportunity to meet to talk over your essay. All right, you have the opportunity to complete revisions and resubmit this. I will give you those due dates or those dates for this, you know, as I share this video with you. Thank you so much for taking it upon yourself to become better writers. This really is where the learning happens, so I appreciate you guys doing that. All right, have an awesome day, and I will see you soon. Thank you so much.